Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I am Tundun Abiola, and This Day Live begins now. Welcome back, and I'd like to now welcome today's panelists, Chike Ogeah, former Commissioner of Information, former Commissioner, I just said that, Delta State, and Professor Bolarinwa, DG Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Do pardon the typo in the prompter.
Thank you. These things happen all the time.
Now we go to Congo, where millions of voters in the DRC are casting their ballots in elections that will shape the future of their vast, troubled country. Electors are choosing a successor to President Joseph Kabila, who is stepping down 2 years after his term limit expired, a delay that sparked bloody clashes and revived traumatic memories of past turmoil. The vote gives the country the chance of its first peaceful transfer of power since it gained independence from Belgium in 1960. But analysts say the risk of violence is great, given that many organizational problems and wide-ranging suspicion of Kabila. The election's credibility has already been strained by repeated delays, the risk of hitches on polling day, and accusations that electronic voting machines will produce a rigged result. Last night, members of political parties failed to agree to a code of conduct to prevent any violence after the elections. So, polling is underway right now as we speak, and so far, thankfully, there have been no reports of violence. It's pretty smooth going, apart from the 1.26 million who are unable to vote today because of, ostensibly, an Ebola scare, so they have to wait till March. So what are your thoughts on the handover that's, well, purported handover, we hope, that actually happens?
Prof is the Prof of International Relations. But really, you know, if I were just to set the ball rolling while Prof gives us the meat, I think this is just the overhang of what's been happening in Africa with our African heads of state. You know, the sit-down, sit-tight syndrome that's always been there. These elections were built to take place 2 years ago. And for one reason or the other, there has just been this continuous postponement. The last, I think they said that there was a fire in the election monitor's office, as it were. But be that as it may, the elections must come. They have come, and they are taking place. Like I said, these rulers, in quotes, are so reluctant to leave when, you know, their tenure expires. And all these shenanigans, as far as I'm concerned, are just ways of trying to extend their tenure, which already is going on and which is very unconstitutional. The truth is that now they said these people will wait because of this Ebola scare for another 2 or 3 months, you know. At the end of the day, with this kind of long-drawn process, how much credibility will it give the entire, you know, the whole entire voting process?
And
that is the problem.
When Kabila Jr. is saying now he'll step down, but he's going to recontest later in the future. Prof,
no, he can't.
But he has
constitutionally barred.
He's expressed his intention. Prof, what are your views on Kabila and this handover?
Chike has actually drawn attention to one of the major problems. The election should not be simply seen as one in which Congolese, you know, are casting their votes. There are 2 categories of voters. We have the legitimate citizens of the DRC who are casting their votes, but we also have the sympathy voters who are not citizens. Now, what is the viewpoint of many of the European countries? What are the vested interests they are seeking to protect through the various candidates? They are already voting without casting physically. Now, it is basically their interests that a priori constitute the first dynamic of the election. Now, let's expatiate on this. The major problem in the DRC, when we are talking about the elections, is not necessarily credibility or non-credibility. It is what Chike has called sit-tight syndrome in Africa. If you go back the memory lane, when the DRC used to be called Zaire, when you have Mobutu Sese Seko, which is authenticism, and you will now see that the sit-tight mentality had a foundation. It was already there. Now, if Joseph Kabila's father, Sese Seko, Mobutu, if all these leaders had actually not been killed, now you will see that this general election will have become another monarchical style of government. Joseph Kabila's tenure ended in 2016. Now he managed to manipulate the system in such a way that from time to time we've been presented with a postponement. Even with that, when many Congolese are saying that the current election will put an end to Joseph Kabila's quote-unquote legacy, he's still saying he's coming back. He can come back. I share partly the argument of Chike, partly. Because what the Constitution says there is that, you know, you cannot serve after 2 continuous terms. You have to wait, all right? There must be a gap after your first 2 terms.
A break. Yeah.
Then after, you can come in.
So what do you think the chances of his anointed successor, Shadare, what do you think that they are? Because there are 3 top runners out of 21 presidential candidates, but Shadare is the president's anointed successor.
Then I come back to the issue of sit-tight syndrome. When the godfather is not there, and the anointed candidate is there, that is what I have always called change in continuity. You change the person, the policy, the interest is continuous. So in this case, there is the likelihood that the anointee will win, but it will be as a result of fraudulent practice. You know, incumbency, factor of incumbency is very, very difficult to fight and defeat.
You know, so, taking a cue from what Prof said, we see that even in our own body politic. That's what he's talking about. Where an outgoing governor, you know, wants, you know, the godson to succeed him. Now, we've even taken it to such ridiculous lengths in Nigeria where, because that godson is not the candidate of the party, the governor forms a party for the godson. The governor remains in the original party. He's funding the godson in another party just because, like he said, he wants continuity. Incumbency in continuity, or what there was a phrase, change in continuity. Exactly.
I like that sort of
exactly. So that is exactly what is happening now, you know, in Africa. Like we said, these are things that are just peculiar to Africa. And why is that so? It is because when leaders leave office, they don't realize that they should just drop it all. You know, like death. You know, when we talk about death, you drop it all and you go. That is how it should be. You've played your part. And let whoever is coming,
it will not work like that.
You know,
see,
come and continue.
The international interest in the DRC is very critical. if you go back to 1977, the politics, look at Shaba 1, Shaba 2, you know, the crisis. The Westerners are interested in the minerals.
That's right.
DRC is very rich, not potentially, very rich, materially there. Now, the Western countries are more interested in a candidate who will continue to assist in the protection of their interests there. Uranium, all these strategic minerals, yeah, they are there.
Iron ore,
so,
gold, everything.
While the Congolese may be thinking that the anointed candidate or others should win, that is not the thinking outside of the country. Outside of the country, the interest is who will be better placed
to preserve the interest of the foreign powers. But how does that translate to development for the people of Congo, which, if you asked me, should be the paramount interest in all of this? How does it?
When you talk about development, there's no way I wouldn't like you. The issue is, what is development?
To uplift the living standards of the people. In Africa, you still know that we have basic issues as a challenge. We have issues of power. See, Chike, we have issues of water. We have issues of child mortality.
Let us travel down to Addis Ababa.
Yes.
The capital of the Ethiopia. African Union. We are told, on the basis of their records, that the Western partners still account for more than 90% of their development projects. They fund Africa's development. Now, if African leaders themselves are unable to fund a quarter of their capital development projects, then how will you then situate the Congo, DRC?
Are you saying that Joseph Kabila would have stayed in perpetuity or to...
No, not he would break it, like he said.
No, if not for the pressure from Western powers. And
the constitution that says that he can't continue after 2 continuous terms. I think that's what, yes, he would have sat down like the man in Zimbabwe did up till he became almost 90. But look, Prof, let me take you up on what you just said. I used to work in the National Planning Commission. You remember them, we're in Abuja together. And I worked directly, in fact, I was the national coordinator for the Overseas Development Agency office in the International Cooperation Department. And I can tell you that, yes, this aid comes in, you know, European Union, DFID, but it's all exaggerated. Because the process of even trying to access these monies, you know, and these things have lifespan. Before you know what's happening, that program is over and we didn't get a dime out of it. So I think it is an overestimated idea that they bring so much money, at least not in Nigeria's case. I don't know, you are in a better place to talk about other African countries, but in Nigeria it is not so. And that is why our development is still arrested as it is today, because we still develop 95, I mean, we still depend 95% on our national budgets. And like you can see, we discussed it last week, you can see the tiny proportion that is being assigned to capital projects.
There are many schools of thought.
You know, that was my experience.
It all depends on which school you want to subscribe to. You see, that reminds me, let's look at what is quite verifiable. African leaders could not fund, you know, the building of their headquarters. All right? It took the Chinese to have offered them to have built the new African Union US dollars.
Yes.
Contrary to almost $1 billion dollars being asked for by European contractors and so on and so forth. In addition to the $230 million US dollars, the Chinese gave $10 million US dollars for upkeep, for maintenance thereafter. Now, what I'm saying is that African leaders will now depend on foreigners simply on the issue of secretariat.
That is embarrassing.
That's embarrassing.
It is truly.
All right? And it was our own Olusegun Obasanjo who suggested at the level of the African Union that, look, let us begin to tax travelers. All right? If you are flying in Africa, let's take certain percentage. If you are staying in an hotel, let's take X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. That is the extent to which, you know, the problem of funding should be appreciated.
I agree with you.
Anyway,
yes.
Back to Congo. We've seen earlier today Joseph Kabila voted, presumably, for Shadare, and we await the results.
That's right.
The monarchy is seemingly over right now, because he did inherit the presidency as one inherits a throne from his father, Laurent Kabila.
That's right.
And for all our criticisms of Nigeria, that would never happen here, we need to say.
We thank God.
Yes, it would never.